Anthony, good morning. Let's just get right into it. Steve Kerr, 2-year contract. I guess the question is, why did it take this long for a 2-year contract to get situated?
Well, I mean, it was a 3-week process, right? Almost exactly from the Friday elimination to basically Friday night, Saturday morning finalization, you would say. Week 1 was getaway for Steve Kerr. It was exit interviews with players, assistant coaches. That following Monday, so we're talking about the beginning of the second week, I think is the most important meeting of this whole situation. It's 2 hours. We reported on it. It was Joe Lacob, it was Mike Dunleavy, it was Steve Kerr. Then there's still a need to, I think, process the conversation and get away again. We talked about the Steve Kerr golf trip that he went on. And I think by the time he got back from that, so we're talking about the second weekend here, you were starting to get a real sense that he was coming back. And then really the last week, let's be honest, we're talking about contracts. We were talking about, the dotting T's, crossing I's, maybe having some final conversations. But I would say over the last 7 days, you could tell he was coming back. It just needed to get to the point where you knew dollars, years, and every, last conversation that needed to happen.
Were there any specific bullet points where things needed to be ironed out regarding influence on the roster, influence over drafts moving forward, or picks that might be used to bring someone in? Was that ever a part of some of the conversations?
I wouldn't say it was like, hey, he wants to make the draft picks. He wants to execute the trades. Like there's a lot of trust between him and Mike Dunleavy on that. And he's of the belief, you talked to him, that Mike's drafted well the last few years. But I will say, even going into the summer, going into the offseason, and my conversations with Steve, prior to the season ending, there was definitely a concern about what the roster is going to look like next year. And that's more about both their starting wings are out for, who knows how long, 3, 4, 5 months into next year. And if there was a desire from the organization, is it going to be like an eject button, like a fuller rebuild, or is there still, a hunger to try to, compete, again, not with the Spurs and the Thunders of the world next year necessarily, although I don't think they're going to say that out loud, but I think we all know the reality. But at least hey, there's still a prioritization to some degree of the present. And I do think Steve signing back on now tells you they're not just going to eject into the future this year. They're going to try to almost have this half measure, if we're being honest, right? Like compete now, but not hit a full rebuild.
Okay, that's interesting the way you phrase that, because I think on the surface, when I heard 2 years, I want him back, but I wanted maybe 3 years or 4 years. Now he's earned the right to do whatever he wants. How should Warrior fans interpret the 2 years? Because you're kind of saying a half rebuild, but kind of not all the way, but the now matters. How are we as Warrior fans supposed to interpret 2 years for Steve Kerr?
Well, it's not one. I think one would have been the signal. Well, one was this past year, right, where it felt like this, they call it the lame duck year in coaching. It wasn't really, because Steve was the one that kind of drove the decision to not talk contract. But, the Warriors wanted multi-years. I think the Warriors probably would have even gone beyond 2. But Steve is I think, made it pretty clear, he's riding out this Steph Curry era. And that doesn't mean it's for sure only 2 years. He's guaranteed to be gone after 2. I just think it's let's kick it down the road to. Remember where last year Steph, Jimmy, and Draymond were all lined up with 2 years, and Steph even came out publicly and was like, hey, let's view these, this final chapters, if you want to say, as 2-year bites at it. And I think that was probably Steve's process here. We'll see what Steph does this summer. Only has 1 year left on his deal. He can talk extension late August. But I understand. Look, Steve's 60. We know he's not going to coach the real post Steph Curry rebuild. So 2 felt like a good number for him. Okay, so there's a lot of dominoes this offseason, and we can peel back all of them. Kerr was one of the first. When we see 2 years, most people assume, then that probably means Draymond's coming back for the 1 year that he has the player option, or opting out and re-signing a multi-year deal. Is that assumption correct? They're going to figure that out. To me, that's a June conversation. I reported it that, in the aftermath of the Kerr contract, this doesn't guarantee Draymond Green is back. He is definitely his $27.6 million salary potentially could be used in a trade. It's one of the tools at their disposal. They no longer have that Kuminga contract, right? And the Porzingis stuff is unsettled. So if you're going to execute a large scale trade, as we saw at the deadline, right, with the Giannis conversations, like his name has to be in the mix, number one. Number two, from my understanding, if the team side is to agree to a player option decline and extend it like a 3-year type number, it's got to be something that lowers the dollar amount to a point that it helps them get a piece now, right? There has to be some immediate benefit to them. If not, Draymond Green might just take the player option and be on an expiring $27.6 million contract, and they figure out his future later. I mean, that's not that bad of a result for Draymond, because 27 is a solid amount at this stage of his career.
Warriors insider for ESPN, Anthony Slater, joining us now on the River Islands guest line. Spadoni and Chasky here, talking a crazy weekend for the Golden State Warriors, bringing back Steve Kerr on a 2-year deal and getting the 11th overall pick in the upcoming draft. And talking about the draft and the lottery yesterday, Anthony, what's kind of the feeling within the Warriors organization getting the 11th pick?
Yeah, I mean, there was like a 77% chance, I think. So it's kind of what was expected. Obviously, they had the far off dream of hopping into the top 4 in a draft where like 1 through 4 is super valuable, even 4. 11, the whole front office all went to Chicago. They're there for the combine. 11 really opens up the doors to, you're probably going to look at 20, 25, 30 type prospects and end up narrowing it down. I know they scouted a ton of these guys that could be in their range during the season. If it was top 4, I would be stunned if they would have used it as a trade asset. Now that it's 11, it feels like it's something they'll at least explore their options in the trade market. Obviously, if they go into the Giannis sweepstakes, the Kawhi, if Kawhi's made available, all that, it's something that those teams rightfully will be like, that's prime chip 1. We want the 11th pick in this draft. And then they need to decide how much they like the 11th pick, whoever's going to be available at 11. Because for example, the Jimmy Butler trade, last deadline or 2 deadlines ago, however you want to term it. I know part of the reason they were willing to put that immediate first in the trade with Wiggins to get Butler was because they didn't love the 15 to 20 range of that draft. They needed to decide how much they love the 11 range of this draft. And I think that's, again, what kind of the next month's about.
Yeah, and I'm looking at this pick, until it gets executed, you have to attach it to money to be able to get something back in return. There's just so much going on with this pick and everything. Like, if they do execute the draft pick, you have kind of alluded to Dunleavy and Kerr working together in concert to find the guy that they like. And they think that they've done a really good job. And I would agree with them. The last couple of picks have been pretty good considering where they were drafting. What's their relationship like right now? Currently right now after this whole contract extension? Good.
Obviously, like a lot of like the higher level conversations and direction of the franchise, a lot of that was Kerr and Lacob. I mean, we all kind of know that. Steve, publicly and privately, has only ever spoken very positively about Mike and kind of the smoothness of the transition from Bob to Mike from, just like a personality relationship standpoint. I would say, definitely see eye to eye, like basketball wise. I think oftentimes we talk about like Kerr type players. Like Mike is kind of like the IQ, the feel, the passing, like that. Like that's kind of in Mike's DNA. We know what he was as a player. So I'm around plenty of like organizational dynamics, across the league. I've been covering these West playoffs. I would say, among the relationships between GM and head coaches, they're, in the top half of the league of like, I guess the smoothness of it.
So there was a lot reported regarding Joe Lacob. Him and Kerr and maybe his desires. And I think that Joe tends to be a lightning rod for fans. Obviously, he's been prolific at winning, but people also point the finger at him. Did he do right by Steve Kerr throughout this entire process, in your estimation, making him the highest paid coach in the league?
That was where I was going first, right? I mean, doing right. He's been the highest paid coach in the league last year, and he will remain for the next couple of years. And I think Joe's like extraordinarily competitive. I think we understand some of the reasons the last few years why the Warriors are where they are and the aging nature of their roster. But Joe's spending like top level in the league type tax dollars. We're just talking about how he's paying the highest paid coach in the league. Look at the Portland situation, right? They won't even keep Thiago Splitter because they're not going to go like over a couple million. Steve made $17.5 million last year. Joe is, and he will tell you this, like he's very involved in the draft process, in the roster, in every, night and day of basketball operations, probably to a degree at times that I think the fan base is uncomfortable with. But even when you talk to Steve or anybody around that knows the league and knows the league like Steve does, has been in so many organizations, the money Joe Lacob is willing to spend is like the most important part of being an owner. And I can understand Joe's frustration and desire to have really like dense conversations about where things are going, because he's spending crazy tax and they won 37 games last year. He's highest paid coach in the league, and they're the 10th seed. Again, I think fans would also go, well, hey, what about the lottery picks that were whiffed and Joe Lacob's involvement in that? Like, we all understand all the complexities and dynamics and blame it. But I also would say, the money Joe Lacob shells out puts him, in an upper echelon of owners to work for.
Warriors insider for ESPN, Anthony Slater, joining us here on the Morning Row. So this was the first big domino of the Warriors offseason, making sure they got their head coach. They got their draft position for this upcoming draft. What is the next domino that Warriors fans should be looking for in these next couple weeks, months, what have you?
I mean, it's draft, right? I mean, just how the league lays the calendar out. Draft is before free agency. And combine this week, they'll be probably rotating in a bunch of dudes to the facility that'll be in that 11th pick range. Like, this is a pretty massive choice for the franchise, and yes, you didn't get your crack at DeBanza or Boozer or whoever you might have loved up top, but like plenty of like high level all-star type players have popped right around 11 or even at 11. Obviously, Klay Thompson is the prime example, in Warriors lore, but this is like the Halliburton range. So if you can hit on this, like, stuff changes quickly. Was it Colin Murray Boyles, I think, was the 11th pick last year? Like, he's not, I don't think he's going to be an 8-time All-Star, but did y'all watch the Raptors Cavaliers series?
Yeah, he's very solid.
Looks like big time small ball center. Like, if the Warriors just have like that level of contributor suddenly by the end of next year, like, everything's going to feel a little bit fresher. So to your point of what's next this offseason, that is next. You have to hit this pick.
I couldn't agree more with you, because everyone's like, a star. So it's like, just get a good rotational piece who can develop into something more over time. And I think it's a big win on a team where it's a lot of old guys. You referenced some of the dominoes, the Curry extension. He's got 1 year left on the deal. You would think he would line up with Kerr or go beyond. It's not, will they give him an extension? What does the extension look like? Is it max or bust? Or is there any world where maybe he takes less than the maximum amount?
I think everything will be a conversation. I think it's not even eligible until late August, right? And I think we're just going to know a lot more in later, like, what are they able to execute this summer and beyond the draft pick, right? I think more important to like the Curry window is like, are they able to swing a bigger trade that really sets it up for, this is a more legitimate 2-year run? What does Jimmy Butler just look like come late August? And what are the conversations between Steph and the franchise? Maybe, again, perhaps they'll talk, a little bit of a pay trim if they believe it would, help them get a piece, but also like, Steph is Steph. We understand, the respect that's going to be paid to him at the end of this era. It's why they're not hitting eject into a rebuild. I think, the cold-hearted version of a front office right now would look at the chessboard of the league and where the Thunder and Spurs are going the next half decade and say maybe like a rebuild is the right move. But because it's Steph, I think he's going to drive a lot of the extension conversation. And if he says max or bust, like, I would say this. I think one of the most important parts of the next few years for the Warriors franchise is to guide the Steph era out well. You don't want to be bristling with him at the end. So I think that, however that plays out in extension talks.
I would agree.
Another big domino, not to cut you off there, Joe, potentially, a lot of Warriors fans and a lot of media have been, connecting the potential dots of a guy that could become available this time tomorrow. That's LeBron James. Obviously, the Lakers are staring an 0-3 deficit in the face against the Oklahoma City Thunder. They can get swept tonight. And then starts the LeBron mania, right? Does he stay in Los Angeles? Does he go back to Cleveland, Ohio? how interested will the Warriors be, Anthony, and how realistic is a LeBron to Golden State scenario next year?
Well, like they've been interested in the past, and LeBron has kind of declined in the past. Like if we're being honest, right? Some of this stuff has been reported, and I think to your question, like yeah, they'd be interested, but right now we're talking about like they could clear like mid-level money. You know, Cleveland's similar. Like part of the trouble I think LeBron might have is like this is no longer like a cap space unrestricted free agent type league. So it would have to maybe be a sign and trade. Would the Lakers even be interested in something like that? And you know, I think that the Lakers showed when a lot of this buzz of him potentially leaving was going on, I think the Lakers were in a tougher spot. They actually impressed before Luka got hurt. LeBron was kind of sliding into this like third type role. They're in the second round. Like, yeah, they're getting pounded by the Thunder, but who isn't? I tend to believe he may go back, honestly.
Wow. So rapid fire, because I have a couple more I want to get before we're up against it here. Porzingis, more likely he gets a multi-year deal or walks?
I would say, you know, multi-year if it's at a lower number, you know, walks to me, some like his summer with the Warriors, particularly, it could be dictated on what they think they can or can't do, because if the cap space of him walking is what allows them to execute something they really want to do, then they probably will. And then there's the sign and trade opportunity here. Like he's eligible for a sign and trade. If he has to agree to it, but he would then become basically an extension of that Kuminga salary slot that they were so adamant on keeping. So a lot of conversations still need to happen.
All right. And then for the Jimmy Butler angle, if you had to put your best bet here, what's the most likely scenario? He stays with the Warriors, he's moved this offseason, or could they do something the way the Milwaukee Bucks did with the Dame Lillard situation where they waived him and then spread that money out over 3 years to create cap space?
I would be stunned if they did a wave and stretch. Okay. That's just like not necessarily how the Warriors operate. That was a Bucks desperation scenario, which, by the way, like, it looked bad at the time, right? I don't feel like we're here second guessing the Damian Lillard wave and stretch. I mean, I remember the day it happened. I was like, whew, I don't know about that one. And it's aged horribly. So I would say no to the final scenario of a wave and stretch. I look, if something using his salary is what gets something done this summer, like it could come out of left field and surprise us. So I'm not saying that's not likely, but my more likely guess is they rehab him. They try to get him back by about the turn of the new year, right? January. And they bet on his mindset to, you know, with the hunger to get back. And by the time January, February, he looks like, you know, a fringe all-star, maybe a little bit less type player. And he helps a bunch. And then they sort out his future the following summer.
Wow. So he'd actually go into man, because I can already picture him wanting an extension. Pods, extension eligible. I mean, that's clearly really low down the list. Is that something that you think that gets done this summer or that bleeds into next year? Because they have it, I think, until October.
Yeah. Well, I'll say a couple things. But on the Butler extension, he's not even eligible till February. And like, you know, you're right. You're right on his like mindset, like historically in these type of scenarios. But he's never like he's rehabbing an ACL, right? You know, he's still like trying to get to the stage of running. So it's tough to be, you know, demanding that on pods. Again, like I think so many things, like there's so many dominoes to go before they get to pods, and like it's really going to be an October question, and it's going to be about both sides. How reasonable do they want to be, right? I mean, I think pod side should not want to go to restricted free agency. You saw it with Kuminga, like it's no longer good to get to restricted free agency. And the Warriors, if they can get him back on something reasonable, something that says, hey, like decent mid-level rotation player type money, which, you know, the dollar amount might shock fans because the new cap is just like, you know, rotation players make $20 million a year. I mean, that's just what it is. As long as they can do something like that, you probably want to get business settled, because as the Warriors have seen over the last several years, if business is not settled, everything becomes a little unsettled. You saw it with Clay, you saw it with Kuminga.
Shasky in the background, literally, as you were talking there, said if Pods gets $22 million a year,
these phones will light on fire.
Will lose their minds.
You're right. That's what rotation guys get.
Will anything about Podziemski not light the on fire?
He had braids in the back seat of a car. And the only reason I know this is because 7,000 people sent it to me, direct messages. I'm like, everyone, back off the kid for one weekend.
Real quick, Anthony, you're a Cleveland Guardians fan, correct?
Bailey, huh?
Patrick Bailey, congratulations.
Yeah.
There you go.
I mean, I guess they're going to have this insane defensive run saved at catcher. I don't know. But, like, I didn't really understand the 29th pick sending that.
Weird,
that
right?
seems high value for the Giants.
That's what I'm
It's
saying.
like an NBA type trade.
Yeah, we'll take it. There you go. Hey, Anthony, great stuff, man. We appreciate it this morning, man.
Happy Mother's Day to your significant other. I saw that post.
Yep. All right. I appreciate y'all.
There
See
he
you
goes.
soon, buddy.
Anthony Slater, courtesy of the River Islands guest line.